The first recorded US execution dates back to 1608 in Jamestown, Virginia, but Europe has employed the death penalty for hundreds of years prior. Throughout history, methods of execution have varied and include hanging, the lethal injection, the electric chair, impalement, stoning, being strung and quartered, burning at the stake, medieval crushing, boiling, sawing, a torture wheel, and even crucifixion. There are plenty of theories and myths surrounding one of the most gruesome forms of execution, decapitation. Since people do not usually survive this method of death, it is impossible to know for sure what effects beheading may have. However, science can help explain what happens to one's body when the head is removed. Some animals can survive long enough for scientists to study them, like a chicken that lived for 18 months without a head, and certain species of worms can regrow their heads after they've been decapitated. I'm now going to cover less known facts about one of history's oldest methods of execution. Decapitation is the act of removing a head. While some maintain this method is swift and painless, others' reports indicate that beheading may not be humane. This violent form of execution severs the head at the neck, which may afford a quick death, with pain lasting for approximately 2 to 7 seconds. Scientists propose that it takes that long for a person's blood pressure to drop, allowing the brain to use the remaining oxygen in the blood. This will diminish the pain effect. However, if it's not done correctly, the result could be pain lasting longer than 7 seconds. Scientists conducted experiments on rats, concluding that the animals died about 17 seconds after decapitation, but lost consciousness at 3.7 seconds. There are stories about severed heads blinking and biting post-decapitation. Modern medical authorities say such accounts, when they're not urban myths or tall tales, are actually due to reflexive twitching instead of deliberate movement. One widely distributed account of supposed consciousness following a beheading comes from Dr. Gabriel Beheadings, a French physician. In 1905, Dr. Beheadings claimed the severed head of a man responded to the sound of his own name by opening his eyelids without any spasmodic contraction. However, there are several reasons to doubt this account, according to modern physicians who have since determined that consciousness is lost within 2 to 3 seconds of decapitation. Decapitation may conjure images of bloodless heads in baskets, but that's not always the case. There is such a thing as internal decapitation, which happens when the skull is severed from the spinal column, but the head is also attached to the body. This most commonly happens when someone is hanged, but can also happen in high-impact accidents. In 2012, 23-year-old Rachel Bailey from Phoenix suffered internal decapitation when a car accident left her skull severed from the spine. She survived. In 2016, 4-year-old Killian from Idaho also survived internal decapitation after a car wreck. In 2015, Valery Spiridonov from Russia volunteered to be the first person ever to have his head installed on another person's body. Spiridonov is a 30-year-old and chronically ill. The procedure, which is projected to take 36 hours and 150 doctors and nurses, technically isn't possible yet, but doctors have a volunteer when the time comes. One journalist maintained the patient could sustain a fate worse than death, because experts have no clear idea of the effects of this traumatic procedure could have on the patient's mind. It is theorized that the transplant could actually result in a hitherto never experienced level and quality of insanity. This controversial technique is being developed by Italian scientist Sergio Canavero and Chinese surgeon Xiaoping Ren, who have conducted trials on cadavers. While the medical community has considered the idea of transplanting heads as something out of Frankenstein, the experimental doctors aspire to help paralyzed individuals. According to Guillotine, its legend and lore, a 1992 non-fiction work by distinguished Professor Dr. C. Gerald, a doctor in 1880, conducted experiments on decapitated heads. The doctor noted that Menesclau's lips trembled and his eyes twitched. Colorado farmer Lloyd Wilson accidentally created a sideshow sensation in 1945 when he botched the decapitation of a chicken named Mike. Missing the jugular vein and leaving most of the brainstem intact allowed Mike to survive, despite being headless. The farmer fed Mike a mix of milk and water with an eyedropper through his neck hole and took him on the road. The farmer reportedly made a lucrative monthly wage at the height of the Wonder Chicken popularity, affording the survival of the family's farm. An annual event called the Headless Chicken Festival is held in honour of Mike. Dr. Joseph Ignace Guillotine invented the guillotine in 1789. He argued that unlike messy sword or axe executions prone to painful mishaps, his device would deliver a clean and humane decapitation. Reportedly, Dr. Guillotine opposed capital punishment and strived to create a more effective method. Even modern-day methods like lethal injections can sometimes fail, and the French guillotine was designed to lessen the pain of the execution. Guillotines made the act of decapitating someone relatively quick, although not necessarily painless. Before the guillotine was invented, using a sword or axe often meant multiple strokes were required to behead someone. Mary, Queen of Scots, for example, required 3 strokes when she was executed in 1587. In 1541, an amateur executioner beheaded Margaret Pole, the 8th Countess of Salisbury, in a drawn-out process that required 11 blows. In 1886, Pope Leo VIII blessed Pole, in part due to her unusually grisly death. In the 1700s, children played with miniature guillotines as toys. The up to 2-foot tall replica featured operational machinery but didn't go without controversy. With the toy, children could decapitate small animals, like rodents. The San Francisco Call documents a mother who refused to buy her child one of the toys. She stated, "If I could, I would arrest the maker and burn such toys by the executioner. Why should any children be encouraged to amuse themselves with things so repugnant by putting into hands this instrument of murder and blood? No, it must not be." Small guillotines were also used as paperweights, as well as turned into accessories for women, such as earrings and necklaces. Many species of worms have the innate regenerative ability to regrow severed organs and segments. However, not only flatworms regrow their heads after a decapitation, but they can reportedly regrow their old memories. Researchers conducted studies, since published in the Journal of Experimental Biology, documenting how the flatworms were able to later recall where their food was kept 2 weeks after decapitation. Scientists are yet to determine the biological explanation for this ability, but a fascination with the capabilities of worms has been prevalent since the 1950s. In one experiment, scientists witnessed how worms could transfer memory via eating another worm. In 2018, a Texas man died after a decapitated rattlesnake bit him. Reportedly, Jennifer Sutcliffe's husband used a shovel to remove the 4-foot snake's head. Scientists explain that while mammals die instantly when their heads are removed, cold-blood creatures like snakes can live for possibly hours after such trauma. National Geographic released a video of a copperhead snake continuing to bite after decapitation and popularised the term zombie snake. The Reign of Terror refers to a period during the French Revolution, after the First French Republic was established. Between June 1793 and the end of July 1794, there were approximately 17,000 death sentences in France by use of guillotine. The Committee of Public Safety executed enemies on both left and right party lines. Those under suspicion of opposition were denied the right to public trial, leaving their only options as acquittal or death. The guillotine became nicknamed the National Razor, and the last execution in France took place in 1977. On April the 9th, 2004, the Islamic extremist group Al-Qaeda kidnapped Nick Burge, an American engineer. In early May of the same year, the terrorists beheaded Burge. Footage of his decapitation stifled the internet. The top 10 search terms in the US on May 13, 2004 all had to do with Nick Burge's beheading video. In fact, the only search that could compete throughout the month of May was American Idol. French authorities convicted Eugene Weidman of multiple kidnappings as well as the murder of a high-class American. On July 17, 1939, the government executed Weidman via guillotine in Paris, France, in front of prison Saint-Pierre. Reportedly, the crowd used handkerchiefs to wipe up Weidman's blood to keep as mementos. Their disrespectful behaviour was so disruptive that French President Albin Lubin banned all public executions. Some Middle Eastern countries still employ public executions as well as beheadings well into the 21st century.